What's up, guys? Joe, good morning. I'm actually a bit sick. Not hungover, but I'm actually sick. I went to like my girlfriend's parents' house and fucking. I usually try to eat as healthy as possible, and I just over there was a lot of like chips and food that was high in sodium and all that crap, and then I just started getting like dizzy, mainly a vertical crap like that. And it turns out it could be like I wasn't really drinking a lot of water. So I'm drinking electrolytes, Pedialyte shit, but from Walgreens because I'm fucking dehydrated. I'm all waking up dizzy and shit, and I'm still feeling it a little bit, but I'm okay. Yeah, drink water, stay hydrated. Try to avoid processed foods, all that fucking crap. Like I said, I don't usually eat like that, so fuck. I fucking came back a little sick. Trust me, if I was hungover, I wouldn't make this video. That being said, thumbnail pick. Alright, so welcome to Joe's Book Club. Now, first of all, most of all, just to get out of the way, this book I actually read a long time ago, and I went to like a bookstore up in LA. I was used, and one of the reasons I like going to bookstores and walking around is because I don't know, somehow there's a book that gets my interest, depending on the subject, it draws my attention, and I grabbed it, and I got this book right now. Usually, almost every book that I read, I always like to make a book review about it, right? Because I don't know, I just started doing that for fun, and like I don't know, for the most part, I feel like people do enjoy me talking about books and stuff like that. And I've been getting like a positive response, or I actually have encouraged people to read books, or people to ask me more questions about the topic of the book itself, right? So making these videos are fun, right? However, because I want to try to maintain some privacy in my life, basically I didn't want to talk about this book that much because I don't want to get too deep into my personal life and how I was raised, how I grew up with, the shit I dealt with, and none of that crap, right? But growing up, my life wasn't 100% perfect. My parents, that's another thing too. I was like, I don't want to go off making myself a victim. I don't want to go off like making it seem like my parents were terrible or anything like that. Just to give you a little background, both of my parents, they're from Central America, and that's mainly Guatemala. That's where El Salvador is at, that area. And the thing is, during that time, it was during like the Reagan administration, they basically interfered big time in Central America and they fucked everything up, the political world. You guys can look it up, just look up the CIA in Central America and you can find a lot of information like that, right? But the thing is that during those times, my parents, when they were growing up, there was a lot of civil war going on, right? So my parents, they grew up seeing a lot of violence and, the economy got fucked up. Basically, American government intervention, they value their currency, they fucked everything up, they supported a lot of like local Contras revolutionaries, to overthrow the government. They caused a lot of drama, and so there's a lot of stuff that I don't want to get into because, I don't want to get too political, but if you are interested, just simply look up CIA in Central America. There's plenty of information there about that during the Reagan administration. So, my parents, part of the reason why they came from Central America over to America because they wanted to get away from the violence that was going on there because there was daily violence. People were being killed and all that shit. So my parents, they grew up with that perspective of life of being defensive. So they had a lot of like, obviously trauma from that growing up, right? So when they came to America and they're starting to create their life here, something like that traumatic is not easy for them to get rid of. So they still had a lot of that upbringing that they kind of gave to me about being protective, being on the edge of the fucking time, stuff like that. And, my dad, he had a tough childhood himself. I don't want to get too into it again, but, him being raised strict, with religion or the home environment, the violence that was going on in the country, a lot of that transferred over to like the house and all that stuff. So it became like not easy growing up. And because I was a male, I was the firstborn, a lot of responsibility was given to me to basically become like the next head of the household in a way, So being a kid from foreign parents, they usually put a lot of responsibility on the firstborn, which was me. So at a young age, my dad had me working to like put food on the table and so on and so forth. And I don't know, long story short, there's a lot of shit that went on in the house I'm not happy about. And at the moment, I still don't feel like comfortable talking about it. But little by little in private, I've been noticing people have been messaging me through Twitter or in just emails, people like talking to me about their situation in life and stuff like that. And I feel like that's something that I don't take lightly in the sense that I won't ignore it. I understand what it's like growing up with some personal feelings that you want to get out, and it's not knowing who to talk to can be difficult. And I understand that. And I want to say straight out, if for whatever reason you want to talk to me, if you want to email me, you want to, just chat with me a bit through the email, I'll share it up here. I'll have an email that's open for you guys to talk with me. If you guys want to chat with me through Twitter or whatever, you guys are more than welcome to, right? As you can imagine, I am busy and all that stuff, so if I don't get back to you, please don't take it personally. But, if I'm able to read it, I'll get back to you and give you some advice. I do watch a lot of videos on self-help at the moment. And, like I said, I read books, so I can try to maybe direct you to a certain direction that might help you. Stuff like that, right? But I'm more than willing to listen to you if you need to. When I was working in construction, I did experience that a lot for some reason, is that customers, they may be going through some personal stuff, but for some reason, I guess because we're not related to them, we're not involved in their circle, I guess they have this comfort to let it out, what was going on through them, because they know that whatever they're going to tell us is not going to backfire on them. Nobody's going to hear about it. So I hear a lot of wives talking about how they don't like their husband or their stepchildren, or husbands are mad at their wives, or I don't know what the fuck. I heard some weird stories. So I'm used to being people talking to me about their personal affairs, so it's nothing new to me, right? But again, if you guys are going through something and you guys need to chat, I got no problem listening to you through email, all right? Please feel free. I'm cool with that, all right? So that being said, now this book, Toxic Parents, Overcoming Their Hurtful Legacy and Reclaiming Your Life. This is by Dr. Suzanne Forward. Really, really, really good fucking book. I really strongly suggest this book if you have grown up with some difficult parents. It's an older book, but it's still worth it. It's like a 300-page book. When I got this book, it's something that I never really making that first step to understand yourself is very difficult. If you were told growing up that you're not good, you're worthless, you're stupid, you're an idiot, you're fucking a waste of life or whatever, especially coming from people that you love, say your parents, that can fuck with you. You taking that information, you start believing it because your parents are in a position of power, authority. As you grow, you're raised to see them as, right? So obviously having positive self-thoughts can be very difficult to develop as you get older. Little by little, I started working on myself. I basically started to cut myself up from my parents. It's not easy, but I really wanted to become a better person, so on and so forth, and improve my self-image, how I thought about myself. And then, I came across this book and it just got my attention. I started reading it. And the more I read this book from start to finish, it really fucked with me big time because there's so much shit that's inside this book that's so relatable that it fucking made me mad. Basically, how the book goes is like this. She's a doctor. She's a psychiatrist or therapist, right? She works with people. Pretty much in every, the book goes through situation where you deal with a parent that's been verbally abusive, physically abusive, and towards the end of the book, which is the extreme one, which is sexual abuse, right? So it goes through everything from dealing with controlling parents, parents that lie, parents that cheat you, parents that steal money from you, parents are verbally abusive, parents are just about every toxic trait that you could think of from a toxic parent. There is a chapter in this book for it, right? You got godlike parents. Just because you didn't mean it doesn't mean it didn't hurt. Pretty much, people say shit, that they want to take it back. Why can't you just let me live my life? The alcoholic parents, the internal bruises from verbal abuse, the physical, attacks, the sexual abusers, trying to understand why parents behave the way they do, the parents that they never ask for forgiveness when they fuck you up. When you're growing up, you still feel like a child because your parents treat you like a child when you're growing up, stuff like that. Codependency, how to confront your parents. That's what goes into that, how to confront your parents, how to talk to your parents, how to create your distance. Basically, the book itself, try not to get too fucking emotional with this shit. But I hope none of you grew up with some difficult situations growing up, but through some of the messages I've been receiving in private from some of my followers, I kind of noticed that there's some people are struggling in some way. So I'm grateful that you kind of reached out because it is difficult. I can understand that, right? Being able to admit something about yourself, right? Just know that basically, at least the message with this book and a lot of books similar to this is that basically, it's not your fault. That personality that you start to develop as a young child, say you become either rebellious, you're quiet, shy, or whatever, certain characteristics you start to develop because of your parents, the way you're being raised, it became more of a defense mechanism, right? Basically with me, something that I did was I became very quiet to the point that I wanted to become invisible, right? There would be days I wouldn't talk, I wouldn't do anything, I didn't have any hobbies, any activities, because the less I'll be noticed, the less my parents would criticize me over, what I'm saying? So the less I will say, the less I'll do, the less my parents will have something to say something about me, to criticize me over. Unfortunately, that was my situation, right? Obviously, things got older, as time went on, I became better and had to work on myself. It's still a work in progress. Like I said, I'm 40. I'm still reading self-help books and stuff like that. But this is something I've been working on for like actually all through my 30s. If I think about it, I'm still working on it, obviously. So it is a work in progress. So it's not easy, right? But being able to like get information and realize that your upbringing was not your fault. Your parents, like in my case, like I said, my parents, they came from a very traumatic environment, a lot of violence. There was basically war going on. People dying in front of them and stuff like that. Their family members were being killed. There's a lot of like stress that can happen, right, in their lifetime, and especially in their household as well. So a lot of that got transferred over. That's why it says in the book, overcoming the hurtful legacy and reclaiming your life. And that's the thing. Is like another thing that gets brought up a lot, and especially these self-help books. It's called generational trauma. Because your parents grew up with a certain trauma, they turn around and they kind of like transfer over to you. It's almost like this is what I grew up with, this is what you grew up with, kind of thing, right? So you gotta learn to like get information, something important as this book, and learn to stop that shit so you don't continue that fucking legacy. Because fuck that. If you ever grew up with some form of depression, that fucking pain on your chest and you're not mentally clear, you don't do shit. It's not easy. It's not an easy lifestyle to have, right? To live like that. Fuck that. So, anyways, there's two stories in this book that kind of stuck out to me the most. Actually, there are several, right? But there's like one where one of her patients was a cop, and it was actually his department that sent him to speak with this doctor because this police officer, he'll put himself in a situation where he was very almost searching for death. Like he'll go into like drug houses without asking for backup. He'll take certain cases like head on by himself. Whether it's people that have guns or are violent, he'll like just go in by himself to like, take care of the situation without any backup, right? And his department were concerned for him because basically, he was putting himself in a very dangerous situation. He could get killed. And it got to the point where like as the doctor was talking to him, he was raised with a very verbally abusive father that basically always belittled him to the point where like, oh, you're not a man enough, you're a pussy, that kind of talk and stuff like that. So he was basically suicidal to the point where like he was putting himself in a situation where he could get killed, which is what he was looking for, right? He got to a point where he actually had his father go with him to the therapist to speak, right? And the father himself did go, but rather than him realizing that he was being too harsh or was very difficult with his child, he basically denied it and basically just turned around and says, oh, you're a fucking pussy. I should have been more difficult on you, right? And, his mother was basically very passive. She was quiet. She was timid, because, she was the father was very authoritative and very verbally abusive to the point that the wife wouldn't interfere because she was scared, right? That was the kind of household that this police officer was raised in. So the relationship between the police officer and his father did not improve, according to this book. At the end of that chapter, the police officer felt a lot better about himself because he confronted a situation that was bothering him. And he realized that it was his father that had like the issues, not him. So basically he became like to work on himself more, that, basically everything that his father was like throwing at him, telling him how he was weak and so on and so forth, is not true. It just is all on him, right? So he had to learn to let go of his father, let him do his thing. And that's the other thing about this book is basically when it comes down to it, the one that's really sick is not the patient. It's the parent or the individual that's causing the problem, right? Because in this case, the police officer actually asked the dad to come and help him out and try to talk things out. So the son was the one that's healthy-minded because he wants to find a solution, right? And that's the thing. You got to have that feeling of you wanting to like improve your life, finding that solution to that issue that you may be dealing with, right? The people that want to continue living that lifestyle, being hateful and angry and all that, they're the ones that are sick because they don't want to like improve themselves in any manner, right? So that's kind of one of the cool things I learned about this book. You making the step and effort to like improve yourself is basically a good sign that you are wanting to achieve mental health. And books like this, is definitely a good starting point. And I do strongly suggest you to check out this book if you have been exposed to any childhood trauma, difficult parents or anything like that, right? If you haven't, I'm proud of you. Good for you. Shit sucks, right? But if you have developed some kind of emotional trauma from difficult parents, I do suggest this book. So there's a lot that goes into this book about, how, say if like you have a difficult father and then you become like very secretive with your mother, like you try to like create kind of like a little clique between you and your mom because you don't want to interfere with your dad or make him upset. You know, that feeling that when your father is home but he's asleep, everybody wants to make sure that they don't do anything to disturb him because they want to, while the dad is asleep, the house is at peace. You know, that kind of mentality. There's a lot of shit that like, the book goes into that where it's like, oh my God, I went through all that. And it was hurtful. You know, I'm not going to lie. Now, thankfully, I did not experience sexual abuse. You know, and I feel terrible for the people that have, but towards the end of the book, it goes into that, how people with sexual trauma deal with it, how to heal, how to start, stuff like that. Yeah, it's a rough chapter to read. It's not easy, but it's here, you know, if you want to start healing mentally. So anyways, I think I've spoken enough. It's a very good book. Like I said, I didn't want to like bring this book up because like I wanted to maintain some privacy in myself. I want to make sure that if I was to talk about these kinds of topics, it's in a manner where like being, I'm not making myself the victim, you know, because I'm not. I also want to make sure that like I don't want to make myself like come off saying that my parents are terrible because they're not. But you know, like I said, they grew up with some difficult situations in their homeland that they had to escape from. So they have that mental trauma that they had to deal with, but it was transferred into like the house. That combined to bad neighborhoods that we grew up in, you know, gang violence and drug use and all that shit. Yeah, growing up was not easy, but thankfully, like I said, I'm definitely smiling a lot more now in this moment in my life, right? So there is information out there for you to get mentally better, that's for sure. And these books are your fucking pills, right, to get started. So anyways, good book, Toxic Parents by Dr. Suzanne Forward. I strongly encourage you to read this book. If you are hurting from some kind of childhood trauma, please check this out. That's all I have to say. Thank you for hanging out with me for a bit. Take care and peace.